Abraham is a prominent figure in the Bible. He is considered the father of the Jewish people and is also revered by Christians and Muslims. The Bible has many stories about Abraham, including his journey from Ur to Canaan, his covenant with God, and his willingness to sacrifice his son Isaac. According to the Bible, Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldeans and was called by God to leave his homeland and go to a new land that God would show him. Abraham obeyed and went to Canaan, where God promised to make him the father of a great nation. God also promised to bless those who blessed Abraham and curse those who cursed him. Abraham's faith in God was tested when God asked him to sacrifice his son Isaac. Abraham obeyed God, but at the last moment, God provided a ram for the sacrifice instead of Isaac. This story is seen as a foreshadowing of God's sacrifice of his own son, Jesus Christ, for the sins of the world. Abraham is also known for his hospitality. When 3 strangers visited him, he welcomed them into his home and provided them with food and drink. The strangers turned out to be angels sent by God, who told Abraham that his wife Sarah would have a son. In summary, the Bible portrays Abraham as a man of great faith who obeyed God's commands and was blessed because of it. His story is an important part of the history of the Jewish people and is also significant to Christians and Muslims. Abraham is also a significant figure in the Quran. He is considered a prophet and is mentioned in many chapters of the Quran. According to the Quran, Abraham was a monotheist who rejected idolatry and believed in one God. He is referred to as Khalilullah, which means friend of God. The Quran tells many stories about Abraham, including his journey from Ur to Canaan, his destruction of idols, his willingness to sacrifice his son Ishmael, and his building of the Kaaba in Mecca. The Quran also emphasizes the importance of Abraham's faith and his obedience to God. Abraham is seen as a role model for Muslims, who are encouraged to follow his example of submission to God. In summary, the Quran portrays Abraham as a prophet who believed in one God and was obedient to his commands. His story is an important part of Islamic history and is considered an example of faith and devotion. In Christianity, the near sacrifice of Isaac is seen as a foreshadowing of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. In Islam, it is Ishmael, Abraham's firstborn son, born of Hagar, who is viewed as the fulfillment of God's promise, and the Prophet Muhammad is his descendant. The Torah and the Injil do not mention Ishmael in the story of Abraham's sacrifice. Instead, Isaac is mentioned as the son whom Abraham was commanded to sacrifice. Jesus talked about Abraham in the Bible. In John 8:56-59, Jesus says, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it, and was glad." The Jews were confused and asked Jesus how he could have seen Abraham, since he was not yet 50 years old. Jesus replied, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am." This statement is significant because Jesus is claiming to be God. I am is a reference to the name of God in the Old Testament. And Jesus is saying that he existed before Abraham, who lived thousands of years before him. This statement is one of the many claims that Jesus made about himself that led to his crucifixion. Abraham is mentioned 72 times in the New Testament. He is one of the most important figures in the New Testament, and his name appears in various contexts. For instance, Matthew traces Jesus' genealogy back to Abraham. Faithful Jews are called sons or daughters of Abraham, and his accomplishments are summarized in Acts 7 and Hebrews 11. James thinks Abraham's faith was so great that he would have offered his son Isaac as a sacrifice if that was what God wanted. Abraham is referred to as the father of faith in the book of Hebrews. The author of Hebrews uses Abraham's faith as an example of how believers should live by faith. In Romans 4, Paul also refers to Abraham as an example of faith and explains how Abraham's faith was credited to him as righteousness.